Coast FM 963, you're on Raw Youth Disability Radio. Angus Hummer with you as always on a beautiful Monday evening, the 19th of August 2020, Raw. And we're well and truly into season roar of Raw as well. If you haven't had enough roaring on your airwaves tonight so far, well, we got a very special episode ahead of us because our very own audio guru and international sports correspondent, Brando Macmillan, is going to be jumping on the mic again for a special interview this episode. He's joining me right now at the very beginning to talk all about what's coming up. Brando, welcome to the intro of Raw.
It's been a while since I did one, do you say?
I know, right? About time you've jumped back in the studio with us to start things off. Well, so, who are you going to be having a chat with tonight?
Well, I'll be having a chat with Jacob Phillips-Reinhard, who we had on the show before when his band Static played live back at April at Hamilton Station Hotel, if you remember that, Angus.
That's right. He made a slight cameo appearance when we got the chance to meet the band Static all together for the first time when they performed alongside Murray Cook's Soul Movers in Brando's favourite town, Newcastle.
They're a four-piece now, so we had to interview the drummer now.
Yeah, we got to get the final missing piece, that's for sure. But you were telling me Jacob actually is a member of another band.
Yes, he is lead singer of Long Distance, a more pop-punk band. So for the interviews, we'll be talking about his disability and how he got into music and how does he overcome the anxiety of performing on stage and balancing both bands at once, because during the chat, which you'll find out that both bands will be playing the same night at the same place.
Goodness, so yeah. He's going to be doing two concerts at once.
Yeah, exactly.
He might need a time turner from Harry Potter. We're going to get Jacob ready on the line to have a chat with you, Brando, but in the meantime, tell us about tonight's music theme.
Well, since we'll be talking to Jacob and his influences are mainly 90s to early 2000s rock, so I thought that'll be tonight's music theme. Well, it makes sense, right?
I reckon that's a fantastic call, and there's no better way to start off than with a band Static have named as one of their biggest influences. To take us to your first chat this evening, Brando, here's a bit of Eskimo Joe with Black Fingernails, Red Wine.
Coast FM 963, you're on Raw Youth Disability Radio. Brand Macmillan here, joining you, and my guest for tonight has been on the show before. Back in April, me and Angus had the chance to interview him and his band Static before he played his gig at the Hamilton Station Hotel. I'm, of course, talking to Jacob Phillips-Reinhard. Jacob, welcome back to the show.
Hello, good to be here.
Good to have you here, man. So, Jacob, a question we like to ask our guest is, what's your disability and how does it affect you?
So, I'm level 2 autistic. With autism, it pretty much affects your whole life, really. Like, there was a quote I saw on Facebook. People without autism will look at the world as if they're looking at a giant forest, whereas autistic people will see the trees in the middle of it. I don't know if it makes any sense, but yeah, ever since I saw that quote, it just summed it up like brilliantly, because yeah, like autistic people we can really see like the real depth and like in life that a lot of people would normally miss, and it's a real gift, honestly, because like if it wasn't for it, I wouldn't be the person who I am today, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially like one of the benefits of autism is definitely creativity. I think you would agree to that.
Oh, absolutely.
With you being a musician and all. So how did you become a musician?
So my dad and my grandma, they're all musicians. So we always had like guitars and instruments laying around the house. We'd have like music playing all the time, and I'd always pick up like my little guitar and try and play along with it. And yeah, I've been playing guitar and singing since age 2.
Far out, yeah. I remember that when we interviewed you back in April, you were playing guitar for over like 10 years or something, right?
Yeah, and having that experience is really good as well. Playing for that long, and like one thing about me is like I've never had a guitar lesson or like vocal lessons or anything. I'm like entirely self-taught.
Oh yeah, kind of like Dave Grohl, right?
Pretty much, yeah. Only recently have I really started to like look into like tabs and everything, because even though learning by ear is a great benefit, a lot of the time it can end up being incorrect, I guess. So I like to get like 100% correct. I like to look at, tabs nowadays.
Yeah, I completely understand that, man. So, Jacob, we're about to play What You Want by your band Long Distance. But before we do so, can you tell us a bit about Long Distance?
Of course. Long Distance is kind of like my main band, which I'm vocalist for. The listeners out there like bands like Blink-182 and all the good stuff from the early 2000s, you'll definitely get a kick out of Long Distance.
definitely the best way to describe the band as someone who has listened to their music. But I'll let all you Raw listeners out there be the judge of that once we play What You Want from their 4-track EP, Left for Dead. And don't you go anywhere, because I'll still have Jacob in the studio with me to talk all things long distance, Static, and how he managed to overcome the anxiety of performing on stage as well as balancing 2 bands at once. Right here on Raw Youth Disability Radio on Coast FM 963. Coast FM 963, you're on Raw Youth Disability Radio. Brendan McMillan here joining you tonight, and during the break, we played the song What You Want by local Newcastle pop punk band Long Distance. And who's still with me in the studio is the band's lead singer, who also plays guitar in another band in Newcastle called Static, Jacob Phillips-Reinhard. Now, Jacob, to kick off this segment, can you tell us a bit about both bands and what you do in them and different styles and everything in between?
Yeah, so in Static, I'm obviously the rhythm guitarist, and we have that real like early 2000s alt rock, Silverchair, Eskimo Joe sort of sound. In Long Distance, I'm the vocalist of Long Distance, and yeah, we have that real nostalgic early 2000s pop punk, Blink-182, New Found Glory sound. And honestly, that's like my bread and butter. Like, I grew up on that sort of music. When you listen to that sort of music, like, all your life, like, it ends up being a massive inspiration when you go into songwriting, and all the stuff that you've listened to and grown up on and like fallen in love with over the years, it just flows into the music that you write.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll take it that you were a member of Long Distance first before Static, because like I remember in the interview that you were a fan of Static beforehand. So like, can you walk us through the process of starting Long Distance and then eventually being part of Static?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'd been going to Static shows pretty much since they started. Like, I even still have the set list from Static's very first show.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so yeah, Long Distance, we started in mid-2022, and we had a few different members to what we have now. Then, yeah, things happened, plans changed, some new guys came in, and it ended up being a really refreshing change, because some of the new guys that came into the band, like, we all have like the same influences, same bands that we listen to, and because we all listen to the same music, we all have pretty much the same creative flows. So when we all get together creatively, we like all the stuff that we work on just absolutely flows together perfectly, and like you couldn't ask for anything better.
So my next question for you is, because I know both bands will be playing at the same show at the same night, like how do you juggle, balancing like both bands all at once? Because it sounds like quite the handful there.
Oh, it's definitely a lot. But, we did a show at the Lasso Gowrie in Newcastle where Long Distance opened the show and then Static played straight afterwards. And it was a really fun experience, but it was really like unnerving at the same time, because it was the first time in a very long time that I'd played in 2 bands in the same day. Like, I'd done it in the past because I'd been in bands prior to Long Distance and Static, but stepping up to doing 2 bands on one night after a while of not doing that, yeah, it was a bit anxiety inducing. But, once we got on stage, like all that goes away, and it's just like you're in the mood and you're just pumping through it, and next thing you know, the set's over and you just crushed it.
Yeah, I remember when I interviewed Cooper, who is the lead singer of Static, who is also on the spectrum. He talks about his anxiety and how when he's on the stage, the anxiety just goes away. It's like he's a completely different person. And I'm guessing it's the exact same with you, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, very rare that I'll really feel any sort of nerves or anxiety while playing a show now, just because I'm so used to it. Even then, there's still those experiences. For example, I play in 2 bands in one night, and you have that, I guess, extra workload. You feel the nerves and the pressure. When you get on stage and that adrenaline takes over, it's just like all that goes away.
It is interesting how all the anxiety and pressure just goes away once you just perform on stage, isn't it? Now, Jacob, my next question for you is, because we do have a lot of listeners out there that do live with anxiety and, like you, want to perform on stage but maybe not have the courage to do so, or they're maybe balancing 2 bands at once like yourself, and they're probably like going through a lot of pressure, the anxiety is really kicking in. What advice would you give to those people?
One thing I'd say is don't give up. Don't let the anxiety and the pressure get to you, because either way, like, you could end up changing someone's life. I've had heaps of people like over the years come up to me and say, wow, your music's really inspired me. And it's crazy to hear that, because to me, it's just like stuff that I wrote that I didn't think would ever get anywhere. But yeah, people have honestly really said to me that as the stuff has really affected them in positive ways. And it's like, that's just crazy to me.
Just makes it all worth in the end, you know, since you put all this work in and since you went through the anxiety and pressure of doing 2 bands, trying to perform on stage. When someone says that, it just makes it all worth it in the end. So to all the listeners out there that are in a similar position like Jacob, keep at it, and one day that will happen to you. Now, unfortunately, that's all the time we have left, but I just want to say thank you to Jacob Phillips-Reinhard to talk about his disability, his music career, and if you want to follow his bands, best way to find Long Distance, if you type up Long Distance Punks, Punks spelled with P-U-N-X, and best way to find Static is type up Static AU, which Static is spelled S-T-A-T-I-K. Anyways, I'm Brendan McMillan, and joining me was Jacob Phillips-Reinhard, and you're on Raw Youth Disability Radio on Coast FM 963.
Youth Disability Radio on Coast FM.
Thanks very much, Brando McMillan right there, having a chat with Jacob Phillips-Reinhard, guitarist and lead singer of the band Long Distance, and also guitarist of the band that we've had on the show a couple of times before, and we even got the chance to see perform live, Static. So cool to get his full story about his experiences living on the autism spectrum and how he got into music and what it's like having a couple of bands that you play in, sometimes having a gig on the exact same night as well. Very nicely done. Very busy guy. And like Brando said, if you'd like to find out more information about both the bands that Jacob is a member of, you can head to our Facebook page. Just search up Coast FM 963. Scroll down till you see the promo post for tonight's episode of Raw. There will be a link on there to the Long Distance Facebook page and also the Static AU Facebook page too. If you'd like to keep up with both bands that Jacob is in, if you like the underground Newcastle punk sort of sound, you can keep up with their music, the members, any new releases that come out, and also upcoming gigs too. You can also follow Long Distance and Static on Spotify. Just search up Long Distance. If you liked the song you heard a moment ago, What You Want, you can find it on there as a single and as part of their EP they released last year with 4 songs on it. The EP is called Left for Dead, and Static with a K at the end, you can also find them on Spotify too. Thanks very much for joining us once again, Jacob. So cool to get your story, and we've seen Static live. Maybe next we'll have to go to a Long Distance gig. I'd be so keen to check you guys out. And before we move on, I know that Jacob listed a few fantastic Aussie bands as big influences of his musicianship, just like Eskimo Joe, Silverchair, and overseas with Blink 182 as well. But listening to the intro of that song we played tonight, What You Want, it kind of reminded me of another pop-punk classic from the mid-2000s. And here it is playing beneath us right now, a bit of Green Day with a song celebrating its 20th birthday, American Idiot.